G'day team, and welcome back to Strong Opinions Loosely Held, where we explore the intersection of technology, business and personal growth. Today I've got the privilege of hosting an old friend of mine, David Reiss, a seasoned executive with over 30 years experience in leadership, consulting, technical sales and marketing roles. Dave's passionate about technology and its transformative power in driving business and personal growth. He believes that successful innovation is not just about the latest tools and technologies, but it's 99% about people behind those things. Throughout his career, David has been at the forefront of digital transformation, helping businesses adapt and thrive in the ever-evolving tech landscape. As the co-CEO and principal consultant at Equinox IT, he leads with a vision that emphasises the human element in technology projects. Wow, what an inspiration, and certainly strongly held opinion of mine as well. So join us as we delve into David's wealth of experience and technology can drive business value. Without too much rambling on, because I can do that, Dave, why don't you share a little bit about your background and journey in the industry that led you to your current role as co-CEO and principal consultant at Equinox?
Thanks, Daryl. Really, thank you for hosting me. I've been enjoying these. So look, I started into technology because my father was always in technology, and he had a computer company. So I started initially, doing odd jobs around the office there, including cleaning dog poo out of the car park and that sort of fun thing. But look, that pretty quickly moved on to kind of being, the junior guy looking after building PCs and putting together simple networks while I kind of wanted to be a developer. Then was a developer for, several years there before joining what was then Telecom Advanced Solutions. Again, in a web development role. Sorry?
Taz.
Yeah. Paul Bowker hired me actually into Telecom Advanced Solutions. So then I spent about 5 years in a software development role, which became team leadership and consulting and a bit of sales. Then about 5 years in a frontline sales role within Gen I, and then about sort of 4.5 years in marketing before moving back out into a consulting role at Spark. So, huge career growth purely within Spark, and that's one of the advantages, I guess, of a large company is you get those different experiences. I finished up in the time-honoured manner. I went back as a contractor for a period, finishing off a project there, and then joined Equinox basically on the Monday after that contract finished. And I joined as a principal consultant with basically the newly formed cloud business in Auckland, where we wanted to become more relevant in the Auckland market by picking kind of cloud and DevOps as the stuff to be famous for. And then some changes there saw me into the GM role, and then into the co-CEO role where Roger Dalgleish, who was our MD, wanted to just take a step back a little bit, and now operates as our COO.
Yeah, cool. It's like quite a varied and mixed, not too dissimilar journey to mine. I don't know that I picked up dog poo other than the dog that I had of my own, but I think you and I intersected about that time, Telecom Advanced Solutions, and of Gen I into a computer land and all of that. And then you went dark side and went marketing. What the heck were you thinking, mate?
I got lured in by Joe Cacciopoli, actually. And Aaron McDonald and that lot. I wanted to, and I've kind of done this a little bit in my career, kind of wanted to solve a big problem and be involved in kind of creating something, and then deciding that's all too hard, and then going into consulting and sales, where I could be a bit more of a magpie and solve a broader range of problems, but maybe not with the full kind of follow through. And I felt at the time that Spark was undercooking some of the cloud stuff, so I wanted to kind of get in and fix that. And so it was in a propositions role in the Spark team, trying to help shape what we were doing there, just before the purchase of Rivera, and then after that CCL as well.
Oh yeah, the Rivera days. That was when I was at Farmlands by then. So kind of like a product management role, if you like, in that sense, bringing the technical competence you have into that forum, or
technical competence, but also what I was aiming to do in that role, obviously, is drive to a winning proposition. Like, what would the business case be for our clients who wanted these services? And which is something that I'd kind of realized I was doing through my career, is moving away from, I really want to be on the tools, to I'm happier talking about the work and maybe being involved in more holistic outcomes, to then actually I want to really understand the business outcomes that come as a result of this, and what success looks like.
Yeah, what's otherwise referred to as jazz, Dave? Like,
yeah.
Getting away from the tools, right? But you still pick up a tool and turn out a bit of stuff if I'm putting a bet down.
Well, I mean, I think you probably jumped off the tools at not too dissimilar a point to me, right?
Yeah. It was about the same.
You're on the tools in computer land, weren't you? And then kind of moved into the sales role and blue-eyed Gen I.
Yeah, blue-eyed was that transition to, I'd been a salesperson to start with. Felt dishonest because I was selling stuff that I didn't know how to work, and that was a shit feeling. So I got so engrossed in knowing how things work that, look, now I'm an engineer, or deeply into that technology, but full circle out and became sales management, my first management role or leadership role. And yeah, it's a fascinating journey. I think it makes sales a whole lot better, or more rounded, if you understand it. What inspired your passion for helping transform their businesses using new and process?
Yeah, look, I think one of the things from being an ex-developer is a lot of it is kind of, around requirements gathering and genuinely understanding some of that functional stuff about what you're trying to achieve. And what I was getting the most out of is where I could actually point at something that was successful. I mean, it was really interesting going through the Spark Sales Academy, for example, the Gen I Sales Academy at the time, and kind of putting together your portfolio, right? And I realized as I was putting that down, actually, it's when I can prove the business case of what Eden Park did on the redevelopment to put the digital signage and networking and Wi-Fi gear that we put in there. That was actually really exciting to me, to kind of see the outcome we were able to deliver, and to talk to them about the art of the possible and what they could do with that enabling technology. And so that, I guess, has been where I've been on that journey. Is it's less about the tools, and it's less about evangelizing certain tools and technologies, but it's more about the meta idea of what you can actually get out of that. And of course, that is a transformation conversation, right? That's not a box drop. That's not deploying a technology. That's actually not only have we got this thing we could do, but how do we actually get best value out of that?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that you mentioned, you use the word box drop. Hey, you and I were in that initial wave of moving away from that, margin-driven, open book kind of conversation to solution-oriented selling. And if I'm not mistaken, you probably used a technique that we were taught winning the investment decision for the digital screen. Oh, shit, that's going back. When was that? That would have been 2005-ish, 2006?
Probably around there, yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic tool, though.
Yeah.
I bet you that still plays divvies in your quiver of tools and techniques, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, and I think, I was talking to someone about this today, actually. Really privileged the education that we got actually at Spark. They did a really good job in that era of investing in their people, and the Sales Academy was internationally regarded, right? And a big part of the reason for that is that they had effectively a business case light course, which was the winning investment decision one. And so that was good for kind of, but I think, my graduation is worth part credits to a BA. And so, that was really, really valuable. And some of the other courses, I think there were 5 main disciplines within that, and they were all really valuable, I thought. And again, I guess it's just the thing, right? When you realize that there's a subset of your job that you're finding a whole lot more interesting and engaging than others. If you're lucky with the right type of roles, then you can kind of shape yourself into doing more of that stuff and less of the stuff you don't want.
Absolutely. And look, I recall fondly being taken through that process, because they're tools and ways of thinking that are still highly relevant today in the context of technology application to business problems, right? I think you share a similar opinion to me, if I'm not mistaken. There's no such thing as a technology project, and if you're thinking that, then you're on the wrong bus. And so how do you define the concept of successful technology projects, and why do you believe they go beyond just technology stuff, mate?
I mean, I've always thought that technology is only there to do something, right? Ideally, it's to make someone's life better, or make something more effective. So, often that's either someone within your business or making your customers' lives better. I mean, in theory, it's a tool, and it shouldn't be seen as anything more than that. So you don't start having, hammer projects, right? That's just one of the tools you you have to do a bunch of stuff where construction is the outcome. So similarly, it's not about the specific technologies you use, it's what you build with them. And ideally, what is it, the Maya Angelou's one, people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And that's one of the things I think that drives a successful adoption of technology is people, genuinely liking it and being delighted by it. And that's not always easy to achieve.
No, it's not in the cold light of just looking at tech, right? It is a tool. And look, you and I have been in the industry for a time. We're excited by shiny shit, if you like. I call it the magpie syndrome. The reseller news with that phrase back in the Genii days. But I think fundamentally you've got to understand what the problem is, and at the risk of overusing a phrase like falling in love with the problem, I think if you fundamentally look at it any other way, like all this bullshit at the moment, have you got an AI strategy? No. Got a business strategy. Like, why do I need the strategy to have it use a tool? And I think the industry does it to ourselves somewhat, and we're not a Microsoft or a Google. Microsoft have got an AI strategy 100% because they're trying to peddle this shit to us, right? You've seen in the news just recently, my boss clued me in on it today that Microsoft has struck a deal to open the 3 Mile Island radioactive plant, or nuclear plant. They'll buy all of the power. That's just crazy, right? Well, that said, how can you elaborate on the importance of aligning technology initiative with business goals? Perhaps share some thinking around applying that winning the investment decision mentality, Dave.
Yeah, look, and I think one of the pieces of work I was proudest of as a salesperson, which is unfortunately unsuccessful, but anyway, it was a proposal I'd written where I was able to show them using numbers they'd given me on exactly what return they were going to get on their investment. And it was able to show it was going to pay for itself in X amount of time. I was able to say, look, you've given me some numbers between this range and this range, even if you kind of go in the middle. In fact, even if you go on the low ball of the number in terms of benefit, clearly this is the right thing to do. They were teetering. This was an ERP project. They were teetering a little bit on it, and part of the reason why I said use the low ball number is because ERP projects are always difficult and they almost always go over. So I was like, look, even if it costs double, it's still a good thing to do. The only downside for me on that one is that all the justification I used worked just as well for my competitor as it did for me. But they maintained, they stayed a client, and they were actually able to get a lot of those benefits that I'd suggested that they would, which was really good. So I think a solid business case is a really big part of it. But as well as that, that's often the result of an initiative that's come out of a strategy. But actually, to be able to tie to a business strategy is where it can be a bit more transformative, and when you can have more of a kind of cyclical relationship between technology strategy or technology innovation or technology ideas that can actually shape business strategy and the kinds of things that could be done. Because obviously, the people who are often creating business strategy aren't doing it with a huge amount of technical experience. They'll have a lot of maybe knowledge in some areas, but they won't necessarily have all the same experience that a genuine technologist coming in can do. And then the flip side, and the reason why it has to be a marrying of those two things, is often your technologists aren't really fully understanding of how the business operates.
Yeah, I think that's a salient point you make, Dave, and I think it's exploring what's next for them in technology would do themselves a huge favour by learning about business. And I'm not suggesting you go and do an MBA, because I think you're quite frankly, pissing money down the drain, but make an effort to understand how businesses operate. And I'm not just talking about a balance sheet and a profit and loss and all of those things. You know, those are results of a business operating well. Sometimes it's operating poorly and it's a shit balance sheet. Don't go and study those things, but study the art of business and the different functions and get around the place, ask questions and expose yourself to opportunity. I mean, fundamentally, if you do that well, then you'll learn how to apply good technology answers or not.
How are you finding as well, though? Because I've got a perspective on this, but how are you finding, you know, your understanding of business now as a business leader and someone within an organization rather than kind of being on the vendor end or on the partner end? And do you kind of feel that your understanding not only of business in general, but then obviously the specific application within your organization, you know, how do you feel about your knowledge and its growth recently?
Oh, look, from my perspective, I wouldn't have the job that I have now had I not owned the business.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd actually hire someone into a similar role as mine if they'd owned a business and never done a dime of technology. To be brutal, I mean, you can learn the technology if you've got the will and desire. One thing I'd reflect on, am I close enough to the organisation as I could be? In some instances, yes, where you get the opportunity, but there's still a maturing of the not just our organisation, but others in accepting having a conversation. Of people have been really surprised when I turn up to a meeting and don't even talk about tech. And I sit there and go, well, what do you expect? Like, seriously, I'm not a technologist. I'm an expert and I know how to apply tech. But let's have a conversation about what we're actually trying to solve first, you know, and fundamentally a little bit weird. It was easy coming outside in because there was expectations on the conversation that you would have because you're getting a product or, you know, you came from Microsoft or whatever. So that carries a bit of baggage, but internally I find that a little bit bizarre, if you like. Yeah, how are you seeing it across organisations too? You duck and dive around the industry as well.
Well, look, and I think I mean, there's a big difference for me, you know, being a salesperson or a marketer talking to other organisations versus being a GM in our organisation and then co-CEO in our organisation. So it's kind of, you know, as I've moved in each of those steps, I've just learned a little bit more about how the sausage is made, right? And it's often not necessarily kept from people, but there's just a really different perspective you get when, you know, you have certain responsibility and accountability. And some of the things, you know, as an executive of the company that I need to be responsible for in terms of security and privacy and health and safety and all that sort of stuff that kind of lands on me in my role that I guess without experiencing it, I maybe didn't understand some of the pressure that was, you know, putting on people in that type of position. So I think it's sometimes not until you really experience it, then you can, you know, genuinely understand it, even if you're told it a lot. And I think it's a relevant point you made there as well about the people coming in with an expectation of, oh, this is the technologist. So that can, you know, narrow the conversation to being one that's maybe a bit easier to see through to a conclusion, but at the same time, I think it can blinker you a little bit into being able to understand the realities outside of what the other person sees you as, and not necessarily going to share, you know, exactly what's keeping them up at night.
Yeah, like that's interesting insight. I mean, you know, even that conversation coming in and changing the perspective, right, in terms of why am I here? Well, I'm not here just to represent the shiny stuff. I'm here to have a good intellectual conversation with you around the problem that we have got, not you have got, and I'm serving you in that sense. And that still needs to come. If you look at the finance department or the marketing department, they're not constantly justifying their job, right? They're just peers around the table with a kind of equivalent or same status conversation, or status not the right word, I didn't really mean that, but in terms of equating to that conversation, right? And I think technology is still a little bit behind the eight ball in that regard. And I find it kind of weird. Well, on one hand, it's weird because business can survive today without tech. But then equally, I'm going, well, tech's still in the lifespan of organisations that have been in business. It's only, call it 50 years, right? It's a bit longer than that, to be fair. But for Puerto, so haven't been around that long, eh? So we're still mature in that sense, right? But that leads to my question for you around the principles or philosophies that guide your approach to transformation and technology at Equinox, and with Equinox going to a customer. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, we've long sort of said people over process over platforms. So it's kind of saying, each of these things are necessary in terms of driving transformation. And in fact, it's that order. People first, then the process, then the technology platform. Because ultimately, we've seen plenty of examples where the technology has been trying to be put in without covering the other two, and that doesn't work. And it can be also incredibly frustrating when you've got people who are empowered and want the technology, but they're in a process that's broken. That means that they can't adapt it. So for example, trying to do some DevOpsy things without a DevOpsy process, or trying to marry up a rigid ITIL type of approach with DevOps. Now, ITIL on its own actually is not a very prescriptive framework. It's often made very prescriptive at the tools that it's put into. So having those conversations about the changes you need as the process kind of being often the outcome, but also the grease between the wheels between the technology and the people.
Yeah, it's fascinating that sense, right? And ultimately, it's for the people, for the people, for the people, or hey tangata, hey tangata, hey tangata. And if you forget that that part of the equation, well, the rest of it's just shit. These processes don't live by themselves, and technology isn't this thing, right? No one except the Microsofts of the world and that technology companies, but technology is deeply embedded in to us. That I mentioned early that I had something to go off script in, and I think that's just provided me a little bit of an opening. It's not going to be a surprise, Dave, but just in terms of helping shape that conversation a little bit more. Click the right button and bring up on the screen this diagram. This isn't a new idea or anything. It's got a name that I wasn't familiar with, the Stacy matrix.
Right.
In terms of our challenge and highlights what we're talking a little bit about at the moment. Technology is never simple, really. It's often complicated, but it's mostly complex, right? Yep. And so there are ways to use a frame like this to help make some decisions. Technology, how, and requirements, what. And I'm interested in your perspective around that. We were on a nice early call this morning. We don't need to go into the details, but we were talking about the left-hand axis requirements, right? Can you share a bit of perspective on how you think about that and why it's important?
Yeah, look, and we're advocates of the Cynefin framework, which is another view of this, and looking at the complicated versus the complex, right? And the idea being that complicated is something that you could wrap your hands around and understand. Therefore, while you might get a level of diminishing returns by doing more requirements, elicitation, and understanding, you can still actually wrap your hands around it and understand it. However, once you start getting into the complex stuff, it becomes a black box. So actually what you're better to do is to basically experiment on it. And that's very much the kind of agile scrum approach, right? It's going, let's not try and understand everything up front. Let's accept that there's stuff that we can't know and shouldn't know. And the best way to get to a successful outcome is actually through experimentation.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I reflected on this too, because I was about to say earlier, I think technologists are fantastic, clever, innovative, caring people, all of the cool things. And can we get stuck on our tools and our terminology and all of that kind of, like I'm guilty as charged, right? Like lock me up, throw the key away. It's a behaviour that I try hard not to be. but don't talk about the tools. Don't talk about the shiny stuff. Focus on why you're making decisions and try and navigate these situations. Hopefully you don't end up in chaos. But the stuff is complex, right? And if you think you can plan it to within an inch of its life and go, that's it, and business cases, X, Y, Z and blah, 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 you're dreaming. I've been doing this shit for 30 years and, not one business case has landed on exactly what it started out stating it was going to do, right? Unless it was a $10,000 spend on something that one person used, right? But that's not real in this world, right? So I just thought that was interesting. I'll jump back to the script a little bit more, but
no, look, I mean, we looking at what kind of makes successful change and understanding people. The second people are involved, and by the way, people are involved in everything, it becomes complex. Because machines are great because you can get a 1 and a 0 when you expect to get a 1 and a 0, and you kind of know if you put the right stuff in, you're going to put the right stuff out. No one ever knows another human brain. Arguably, no one ever truly knows their own brain. So the idea of genuinely being able to predict and have certainty around what's going to happen the second you get one person involved is minimal. And the second you expand that out to an entire organization and you start getting effectively a large biological computer together, or a hive mind or a hive brain getting together, it's entirely unknowable. So the only thing you can do is to experiment. But of course, those need to be high quality experiments. You've kind of got to go into those with a falsifiable hypothesis, size them right, try them out, and then measure and learn. And if you don't do the measure and learn piece, then you're probably just as lucky going down a waterfall path, to be honest, if you're not doing a good amount of learning from it. And that requires a receptive organization to actually buy into participating in that type of relationship as well, right? Or that type of process.
Yeah, I think pick up from what you said then, the salient thing is learning, being able to learn and adapt quick, right? This isn't about trying to make a guess on absolutely every single scenario. Shit will change, right? But being able to adapt and respond. And I thought when you're talking about bio, I thought you were going to say biohazard. When you get a group of people, it becomes a biohazard, not by design, but by just all this group mentality, right? And even so, an old friend, colleague of mine, a company I was at prior to Sulfin Farms, shared a little thing on LinkedIn about the tunnel in reflection on the Manawanui Navy incident over the week. And there's all these people offering dialogue, and they were there. And it's all supposition. And how can you know? You weren't in the tunnel, you're on the outside looking at the tunnel. So, those things become quite powerful in the way that you lean in and approach these things. That said, technology is obviously key to what we do, Dave. You and I wouldn't be where we are today without it, and I am grateful for the opportunities it's afforded me. But how do you see the role of technology evolving and shaping the future of businesses and industries? Like this digital transformation, I think it's just a marketing bullshit, but we've been digital transforming since we went paperless office with Xerox, haven't we? Anyway, what's your kind of view on that?
As you know, I took a wee foray into thought leadership at one point, and a lot of that was around SMAC, social mobility analytics cloud. Obviously, everyone's now talking AI. That's just another extension on that same stuff, to my mind, to be honest. And look, and I think it's a continuation of that. It's an evolution of that. But in terms of what's changing, it's going to be interesting to see how much, because you're seeing some worrying stuff from some vendors really pushing for shadow IT on steroids, right? I think AI is doing that. I think SaaS apps are doing that. I think even if you look at things like Power Apps and the Power Platform, that's got a real risk of running away as well. I think it's really important for technologists and those responsible for technology to meet the business well more than halfway, because there is a chance of, them becoming really disillusioned and going their own path, which I think would be really detrimental, because, of course, none of those solutions on their own, and by the way, they would be, consumed by a business user, are going to be stable, reliable, private, secure. Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff that the technologists know that's still fundamentals that need to happen. And if too much shadow AI, shadow IT keeps proliferating, those are the things that end you up in the news for all the wrong reasons, right?
Yeah, I think that's prudent advice, Dave. Look, I fundamentally believe we're still recovering as an industry from the trust that we eroded with Y2K. What happened? Nothing. But we'll pay you millions before it happens. Look, I'm being a bit cynical there, but ultimately we've got these things that run away. And if I use an example of that AI, we've been experimenting, as you know, with some low-code, no-code platforms. Clearly, you mentioned the Power Platform, but someone mentioned something to me the other day around, well, we're forgoing those, and we're just using Claude and AI to help us code. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to try something. And you know what? Over the weekend, using Claude AI and Visual Studio Code in plain English, I was able to pull together a fully functional website with marketing content and testimonials and a login and a log out and a profile and all this, and some total of about 10 or 12 hours, right? I was down a rabbit hole, I tell you. But that shit in the hands of the person that doesn't understand what they're seeing or doing is a little bit dangerous, right?
But to say to the AI, put a form on here to capture a credit card, that would be really useful for me to have.
Yeah, and not understand they go to jail if PI, all of that, those things that we've had to care about for years. So it's about getting that equal seat at the table, if you like. Yeah. We've been talking about it for years and establishing it. It comes with trust, though, so don't erode trust. Don't promise what you can't deliver, right? That sells, isn't it? Yeah, no, I don't know where I heard that. Anyway, Daz. Hey,
trademark it.
I'll trademark it. I get it on Wikipedia, mate. The minute that it's up there, it's legit. It reminds me of some of those Rule of 78 things we got introduced to back in the day, calculating our commission and shit, mate. They were on Wikipedia. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Jeff Facer taught me a lot of good stuff, but those are good days. Stay on track, Daz. How about sharing a specific example from your experience where successful technology project was not just about the technology itself? I'm interested. You talked a little bit about Eden Park and that. Perhaps you don't need to give names or anything, but
that was mainly, it was almost more personally successful because I just got a real kick out of driving past Eden Park on my way home every day. And it was actually more of a feeling of having built something than I'd had a lot prior. But no, look, I think, we recently helped a client who kind of had a need to be able to go global and do it on some cloud platforms. And they needed flexibility, and they didn't, we kind of helped them out in doing that. One of the things I think that made it such a successful project is that they had a need for some stuff that was a little bit non-standard, right, in terms of quite fundamental, business change. And they had desires to centralize some stuff and desires to allow autonomy in other places. And they came with quite a clear idea of the fact that that's what they needed to do. And they actually had a really skilled team at doing a lot of stuff that meant that when we were kind of teaching them some things that were additive to what they already knew and just kind of structuring things in a way that we knew were going to be really successful for them. I mean, our contact there kind of said he kind of said it was the best investment they made that year, was that work that they did with us, because it just really unlocked what would otherwise have been really painful. It was a genuine turning something that would have been months of effort to days of effort, including a good amount of kind of testing and assurance. And so look, and the main thing that was successful about that is, I say, business outcomes being delivered, and not hugely normal business outcomes, quite extreme need on business outcomes. but also just the fact that their team was able to pick up and do the new stuff, and we've kind of marked their homework a little bit later on, and I've absolutely lifted in terms of the knowledge in areas that were pretty new to them, and they're just doing really effective and really good things. So again, it was kind of a people change, massively needing to be able to change a process, because bringing in new businesses or transacting in new geographies, and underpinned by the right technology around a good, flexible cloud platform.
Yeah, like those are key statements earlier. People over process over platform or technology, right? It's so crucial. I mean, I recall a couple of projects through my time, and it was always about seeing a smile on someone's face on the Monday after the change or whatever, and the level of frustration they might have had in their job becomes palpable, or they get some new insight into something they couldn't see before. As an example, not so recent, 4 or 5 years ago, where a couple of the guys in the organisation thought they were doing this many of something. They had no idea they were doing double or triple that almost in a quarter. But it was simple because they couldn't see it. They were still so stuck on this very paper, like they had in trays and out trays and envelopes and stuff that was handwritten. So there was no visibility of the Herculean amount of work that they were getting through, right? And you could see it. They were both not particularly healthy specimens because they were stuck to their seat. And the change came. Like, we can't claim that they got a new lease on life, but I like to think we afforded them that opportunity, right? How do you approach the transformation, or any project, to be fair? I don't even know why I had digital transformation, blah, 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 marketing, blah, blah, blah. Projects to ensure they deliver business value. You go back to some of our earlier conversation, but what does it look like on Monday after you've done what you've had to do?
So the last bit of on the question.
During the business value, so what it looks like on Monday, what did you have to do to get it looking like it did on Monday, a successful outcome or value?
Sure. And look, and I think, and you may remember planning for strategic investment, the framework that we used in Spark for a little while there, which was very much what's that?
I may.
Yeah. And look, some of the things I took from that as a framework that I really quite liked was some of the things around agree a candidate view of where you want to be in 3 to 5 years, right? And accept that is a direction, it's not a destination, because the world will change before you get there. But at least have those goalposts that you can be aiming for. And then what you can do is you can make decisions all along that path, and you can choose to deviate from that path, and you know the impact of deviating, and whether it's maybe a tactical decision that you'd move away from later. So I think kind of having that vision, having that direction that you want to go in is kind of key. And then just breaking it down into really small chunks, because you don't really want an aha moment on a Monday, because that will be jarring for the people involved and they'll probably find it too much. What you want is lots of mini aha moments, I think, for a long period of time, where you build up that trust that means that people have confidence that they're in safe hands, that the organization that are in kind of cares for them and is trying to help them and make their jobs better, and that some of those technologies and processes are actually making things just a little bit better. Not every day, that's not the cadence that things happens, but maybe things a little bit better every week or every couple of weeks.
Yeah, I get that. I think I could live with one big aha as long as it wasn't an oh shit. But the point being, small.
How many big ahas have you seen not be an oh shit?
Yeah, exactly. We all plan for the big aha, like ta-da, and it actually is an oh shit moment. So it's a real good way of reflecting on it and looking at how you build that trust, because then you get the opportunity to do the next thing, and those things become just crucial to how people then engage with technology as well, right? I think the worst thing you can do is, oh, look, there's a new icon on the desktop, don't know what it does. That's an oh shit moment, right? And look, here's something I'll posture for you. I got into a LinkedIn conversation at some point in the not too distant past, and it was a conversation around the success of a project, and the nature of the conversation was going along these lines. The project was successful, but we didn't get the outcomes we were after. And I'm like, how the fuck? Whoops. How do you arrive at that point? Oh no, but those were things we couldn't control. And I'm like, yeah, but if you were striving to get them, just because you finished on time and under budget doesn't mean the project's successful. Thoughts?
Yeah, no, look, and there's been some examples that I've seen of that as well. I think that's that whole kind of losing the vision, right? So deviation off that vision, I think. And look, like with all this stuff, it should be it should boil down to a dollar number of percentage. It should be something measurable that you're trying to achieve, because you want to know if you're deviating too far away from that. But yeah, to get to the end of something and not realize that where you've gotten to is not the business case, right? And look, and talking about trust, that's one of the ways you erode trust in the executive or in the board on a big technology project, right? Is if they say, okay, cool, show us how you went against the business case. So kind of having effective governance across something and making sure that the commercial and business outcome measures have just as much priority as the technologists doing the thing, or what maybe users might want, because users shouldn't always get what they want. There's going to have to be some trade-offs. They're going to have to be trade-offs for the business good. So if you don't have the right people making those decisions, then you can get yourself in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, I agree. And I had to step away from the keyword, because that was going to get into a bit of keyword warfare, and that's not my style. But in terms of that, get clear on what your success criteria or measurement or desires are. And, I don't care if it's written down or not, but if the expectations are set because you've had that conversation, then those are the things, that commitments you've made, that's what you're going to live up to. I can't sit here either and say it's easy, because if it was easy, every project we ever did would just be simple. Go back to that diagram I've flashed up on the screen. Everything in this world pretty much lives in that complex thing. Yes, there is other stuff that are in simple and complicated, but most of our life is in that complex thing, right? And I think all too often we try and simplify it and oversimplify it and cock it up. And not because the technology didn't deliver, but because you've misconstrued the messaging and the narrative and the story that helps you get to a better place, right? And that's not about making shit up either. Like, I always have a problem telling stories, right? But it isn't about lying, but it's about being really clear on the why. In your opinion, what role does technology play in the success of? That's bullshit. I've already asked that question. Let me start again here, mate. Can you discuss a challenging project where the focus on business outcomes rather than technology led to the successful outcome? We've just talked about, so I might skip over that one too, unless you've got an answer or it made more sense.
I do have one on that, because one of the things I is kind of reflecting on, while thinking about this conversation, is some of the things that kind of need to happen for change to be tolerated, because of course, changing is painful for people to do. And one of the fun things of change for me, it was Dean Sloan and I were made co-CEOs just before COVID, right? So we got a whole lot of change literally just before lockdown. But actually, it became the immovable object that forced a lot of change that people had to tolerate. So we helped a client have their developers able to work remotely, because they previously had desktops, and they had to pull those desktops out of the office to kind of go and be able to do work from home, because they didn't have laptops and they didn't have any remote technology. So we put in place a remote solution for them on Azure Virtual Desktop, and meant that kind of completely unlocked the location by which any of those developers would have worked. And even though it was such a drastic improvement on what they had to do, and definitely would have had to do if there were further lockdowns that meant they had to pick the computers up, it was still change. So it was still painful, because it was asking people to change stuff. I mean, we were talking the perception stuff, and you know all about this, of performance of a desktop or a remote desktop, right? It's like, this is intolerably slow, and you find out that it takes half a second longer to do something, and it does other things 10 times the speed, but they don't focus on that. but look, that was a big process around training, engaging and working with a bunch of stakeholders. And I think that's the problem with an aha moment on anything as personal as a device. I was kind of thinking, we were talking before about the big aha moment. It's like, if you've got Apple money, you can get the aha moment with a new iPhone, right? Because it's genuinely impressive. Unless you've got the money to do something that well, it's actually a whole lot about collaboration, co-creation, and having people brought on the journey.
Yeah, absolutely right. And wasn't COVID a catalyzing moment for a lot of organisations, particularly with technology was concerned, right? Holy shit! Some of the technology that made the transition from in the office to home had been available for 15 plus years, right? I was working at Microsoft doing shit in 2008 that some organisations weren't doing in 2020. It's lunacy, because it wasn't expensive. It was just having the most up-to-date operating system, and that's fun. You buy the latest computer and you've got it, kind of thing. So they're not often seen in that context of value adding, right? Because it's just a commodity item, so to speak. But yeah, that's funny. We made some tough choices around a particular approach to remote connectivity, and that when we were doing a desktop operating upgrade at the place I worked at, and it set us up perfectly for exactly what you described, right? Without missing a heartbeat. So look, those are good things. That said, you and I do like some shiny shit. How do you navigate the balance between the desire for technical and technological innovation against business needs when working on initiatives, right, or a change initiative, or whatever it is?
Yeah, look, I think a lot of people are going to be testing this out at the moment and in the coming months with AI, given that the Gartners of the world and the McKinseys of the world are telling everyone that they need an AI strategy. And I think it's the best ones are where you've actually got genuine business and business leader and executive engagement in something, and good support from technologists. And the technologists, again, are more than meeting them halfway, right? They're actually thinking about the business outcomes, not the toys. So, I was working with someone, I can't remember who it was now, I wish I could attribute them, but they were kind of saying, an experiment without a falsifiable hypothesis is just giving people toys to play with. And I think that's really true, and I think that's the risk as organizations turn innovation into, there's some smart people, let's give them some tech. And so if those are smart people, then they don't have the right business now, so you're probably not going to get a great outcome from it. But then at the other side of things, you can't necessarily fully understand business need in isolation and then just drive something. It's got to be quite a symbiotic relationship, I think, between business and technology thinkers.
Yeah, what I'd add to that too, Dave, is as a technology leader, and I've got a few K's on the clock in that type of role. What I'd be encouraging people to do is learn how to describe what these new things are, or the innovation that you're experimenting with can solve a challenge for one of your colleagues, right? And you don't have to sit there for hours asking for a list of 1,000 requirements, death by 1,000 paper cuts or Excel formulas. But you just need to be observant, empathetic, and develop a desire to truly understand how they do their job and where there might be applicable opportunities for improving that, right? And demonstrate you understood that, and don't walk in with acronyms and shiny shit language that does my head in.
Yeah, and the more you can try to get to a business case, right, and refine the business case, and it doesn't have to be a full business case, obviously, but it's got to be, that whole thought of, wait a minute, we're going to invest in stuff here. And we're not just investing in the tools, we're investing in lost productivity while people make change. We're investing in failures that don't go the way we hope they would, and the technology. So actually genuinely keeping that commercial lens on it and going, wait a minute, should we stop doing this? And I think actually AI is going to be a good example where people should go in with a potential use case or a need that could be fulfilled. And then they should be trying to disprove any assumptions that they have that it's going to be successful. Take that kind of jaundiced look on it, and try and get 10 amazing ideas down to 2 or 3 genuinely good ideas that can drive value. And if those are great, maybe then you can spin up the others, or maybe they'll give you more ideas that'll spin up better ones than the original 10.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, even simple things. I've just been reminded, because you and I spent 2.5 years odd working in that Auckland corporate space, and it was a transitionary time for a lot of the. Dave and I came from a heavily IT oriented background, but most of the team were telco people, right? And so they had a formulaic approach to selling connectivity and minutes. But into this thing, well, they won't buy that backup solution or these other things. And I can still clearly remember having a conversation with one of my team going, we'll put it different. You're not selling a backup solution. You're selling a problem to the backup not completing successfully and interrupting payroll on Tuesday, and the risk that presents to the CFO. Oh, fuck. Oh, they'll spend 120 grand to stop that happening. Yeah. Ting, light bulb moment, right? So it's just about how you change the position of what you're talking about ultimately, or trying to be creatively connecting to a real problem. Don't FUD people though, eh?
Well, that was that was the other one, right? Is uncovering not the need, but the need behind the need. And again, I mean, ultimately, that should be able to boil down to a dollar number or percentage. I mean, I think a lot of New Zealand organisations, I believe, underinvest in risk. I think that actually may be improving, but it's definitely improving now that security is a board responsibility. But I think it's still really, really hard for people to imagine how bad things can get with technology and how disruptive it could be if something goes wrong. And CrowdStrike was a good example that reminded people actually that stuff can go badly. But when you're in that plain sailing period where nothing has hit the press about things going horribly wrong, I think it's the natural inclination, especially in the current climate and the current economy, is to not, to basically just hope that that server you've got running under the desk is going to still keep running. That those backups that someone takes home most nights are going to be sufficient. All that sort of stuff.
Yeah, what is this? 1980? Yeah, that's right, though, Dave. And it's a scary proposition, and people go, "I won't put everything in the cloud because CrowdStrike." Well, I can guarantee you, if you went back and looked at history, when we were moving from having the stone mill next to the factory turning with water to a centralized power source, you were beholden to the centralized provider and all of their infrastructure, right? The pattern is repeating. So don't for 1 minute think that this is, it hasn't been done before, and it's more complex naturally, but it's not a new pattern of delivery, and it comes with the same kind of consideration, and probably adds a little bit more risk to your business because you're dependent on these things, but no more risky than centralized power providing a manufacturing plant. Like, hello.
And that's just about. Sorry, you cut out there.
I just said I don't want to oversimplify it by any stretch. Let's look to history.
Yeah, and then it is just about genuinely assessing risk, right? And going, what could go wrong with that centralized thing we're getting? What's the impact of it going wrong? And then what are some management and mitigation we can put in place to mean that we become comfortable?
Yeah, absolutely. And that comfort will come with a level of investment. Now, whether that's people investment or whether that's, it's real monopoly money to make that thing go away, then that's what you've got to balance it out, right? Winning the investment decision. It's all how you couch this. If you're a technology professional, go and learn about how to do business. It doesn't mean, like I said earlier, don't go and do an MBA necessarily, but cozy up with someone that understands this really good. Look, what advice would you give? What's the single piece of advice that you would give to someone leaning into these kind of things now that you wish you had had at some point in your career that's helpful?
And look, I mean, it's one that we've been saying for a little while, but it is genuinely embracing co-creation. not not downplaying the amount of impact that change has on people, and recognizing as I've shown you before, Daryl, the Satir curve, Virginia Satir's model, on kind of change on the human brain, and how long it can kind of take going through the trough of disillusionment around a lower performance for a period. Just accept that these are things that need to happen. You need to invest to make things better. I think too often there's a desire to save money first and assume that innovation is going to happen that'll mean that efficiency is gained, and I think that it's an irresponsible view, and one that I think is probably putting people at risk more than it should be. And I think just genuinely understanding the impact of change, bringing people on the journey of that change, and having champions involved in things that means that it sticks. We've definitely found situations where people will revert back to what they know. There's a massive force of inertia in most people, and it takes time for them to genuinely make a change in the way they're doing things to get the most out of any kind of transformative activity. So if you don't give people that time through the project, you're going to have to give them that time after the project, which will involve some governance ongoing, potentially, to make that happen. Otherwise, they're going to revert to not getting the best value of what could be done, and probably not enjoying the process.
Yeah, and I'd add something to reflect on there too. My perspective, having been a gym owner and coaching people through transformative personal change, the thing that shitted me off about the health industry was there's a silver bullet, there's a single pill you can take and do this for 7 days, like whatever. And 21 days is the oft thrown thing out there about habit and change, right? Well, I don't buy that either, but I also you don't need to do 10,000 reps to master, right? But it's certainly more than just 3 weeks. You have to take time and lean into that, right? And look, if you look at the patterns we've gone through, probably when you and I were a little less grey here on our chins, change management was something done by the project manager as a line item in the project charter or Gantt chart, or it was a CAB, not this organisational change thinking that we're becoming accustomed to these days, right? Can you share a case study or success story where your approach to technology projects align with the belief that successful projects aren't just about technology? A little bit more in line with where you were going with that change stuff. Yeah, look, I think the ones that have had the most kind of cultural impact have been the ones that have been around doing some agile things. And it's interesting, agile's out of favor at the moment, and often it's because I think it's been not fully applied. So I think where people are not only understanding what they need to do, but most importantly why they need to do it, and understanding their why within the overall why. I mean, I think that whole 21 days might be great for one person doing one thing with particular results, but them doing it with 100 other people at a different stage in their 21 days, invalidating the success of something that the individual would feel. I think there's an exponential growth in terms of complexity there. And I think it's that, knowing that it takes time for things to settle down, but knowing that people who genuinely understand the why and the how of the things, not just the what, is really what leads to success. And it takes away a lot of the pain for the people who don't maybe understand the why, and they only really want to get the what and the how. Because if they don't have someone driving with the why, they won't get what they need. They'll just be doing things differently, not better. And they'll end up less happy as a result. Yeah, it's interesting you talk about the why. Having that why, I look at that as just a little bit of hope, it's a little bit of vision, sort of direction, and the old technique, 5 whys, getting to the nub of the problem. And like the final comments that I would make in that regard are, don't be afraid to ask more questions, right? And I remember coaching a junior techo back in the Computerland days, and we would focus on how you write a statement of work and all that, and all these guys, we're always having to add scope, and customers, they didn't know what they were. And I said, how about you flip that around and don't blame the customer, but take responsibility for asking more questions, right? Because a scope change is probably predicated on the fact you assume too much. Oh, don't be like that. So yeah, look, change is so important and all of that. Look, Dave, is there any final words that you would like to leave the crowd with for those listening live? And in perpetuity, mate, you're on the tube now, so.
No abiding words of wisdom, unfortunately. Just thank you for the opportunity, Daz. It's been great having a chat as always, and I'll look forward to the future episodes as well.
Yeah, look, appreciate you and the time you've afforded me. Sometimes I can be cheeky and ask, but if you don't ask, you never get. So appreciate the time you've afforded me, Dave. I know it's a Monday night and family time and all that. So thank you, and to anyone listening, and we'll catch you next time in a fortnight with someone else having strong opinions, loosely held. Thanks, team.
Thank you.